Hi everyone, welcome to Straight Up for Friday, April the 29th. It's amazing. April's almost over. It'll be 102 degrees outside before we know it. I'm Scott Brooks, of course, of the Waxahachie Sun, and today I kind of want to share with you a straight up pile of information here. It's not going to take me but about 15 minutes, but there are some things happening both locally and abroad that I think it's worth touching on, and some of this you may have heard about, some of this you may not have heard about, but I think all of it's worthy of some degree of awareness, if not a little degree of investigation, just so that you know kind of what's going on. One of the concerns I've had about Waxahachie for a long time now is that we stay separate and distinct from what's going on in the rest of the country. That is to say, whether it's political division, whether it's hatred, whether it's crime, whether it's craziness, you name it. I think Waxahachie is certainly worth working hard to kind of put I don't know about a moat, but something around us that says we're going to work doubly hard to be sure that we keep Waxahachie extraordinary, safe, sound, and off the crazy list, as it were. So that said, I just want to share with you a couple of things locally and then two or three things nationally, and just give you a sense of how I think, if we're not careful, things we don't want happening here are coming here to permeate, is beginning to permeate our community. Many of you already may be aware of the shooting on Kaufman Street last April the 19th, last Tuesday, not this past Tuesday, but the Tuesday before this past Tuesday, where in broad daylight, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, two men got into an argument about a parking space in what is a relatively new townhouse development and a rather quaint, small, it's gated little parking area for those townhomes. As you may know by now, the argument led to a just straight up shooting, something you would see in another part of the country, and yet it happened right here, a couple miles from where I'm sitting and talking to you now. There's a lot to be said about what happened. Anytime a video is shown of another person attempting to take the life of a fellow human being, it is shocking, it's stunning. It's hard to believe, it's hard to picture. It's almost like watching a train wreck. And many people, certainly here, will look at that video over and over again. As happens with things like that, the national media gets a hold of it and suddenly it becomes clickbait for the rest of the country. So it's sensationalized, again, used as clickbait so as to drive viewers and readership and unique visitors to a website, and it goes on and on. This incident has become nationwide. It was on, I think, on Inside Edition. It's certainly been on Fox News and the other major networks in the country, again, of a shooting right here in Waxahachie. So I say that to say this. That's an example of something that happens usually in our minds only in other places. You know, we think of Kenosha, Wisconsin, where we saw things happen. We think of the George Floyd incident. And we think of many other examples where shootings take place, but not here at home. In this case, this one took place here at home. So I want to say just a couple of things about that. One, we should know the facts before we start spouting off. A number of people have already done that, whether it's on the countless social media sites that don't really care much about what's being said, and you know, certainly somebody that defends the right to free speech. I don't really either. However, we ought to have some degree of information before we start spouting off. You know, even in the past week, or not long after the shooting, one of our elected officials decided that he would indict, criticize, take to task two judges who had something to say about the bond that was set and whether that bond was too high or too low. This elected official decided it was up to him to take to task these judges without knowing anything about the story other than what he saw on video. So it just becomes more than what it actually is, because what it already is big enough. there's no sense for anybody, whether it's an elected official or not an elected official, to go running at the mouth to talk about something that he or she knows little about. So I want to caution all of us to, whether it's in this case or any other case, to know more about what happened before we start giving opinions about it. The other is that it draws national attention to Waxahachie, and we don't want Waxahachie synonymous with things like this. So we hope that we can prevent things like this from happening, but that's not possible. It's just the way the world works. So the national attention we're getting is not the good kind. When we go off on social media sites and talk about how bad it is or what we think of it, it only makes it worse. So I think we ought to just see what happened and then let the courts let the process take care of itself. And as more is learned and more is reported, we'll be able to have a better sense of whether or not we should say anything at all. So I just want to just give you that example of something that took place here, and that if we're not careful, it'll make us just look like another city, typical city in America. The other thing I wanted to share with you, or event, I guess you could call it, is the murder trial of a guy named Guy Lynch. I decided to take some time this past week to go and sit in the courtroom and watch two well-prepared, effective, professional prosecutors try a case of a man who and I'm not making this up, but when I tell you that the defense's argument was that the devil made this guy, his name is Guy, take the life of someone he called his girlfriend and then dump her body in Ennis. When I tell you that, that's exactly what happened. That was the defense. And the reason I give it is as an example of something to consider is because it really is an example of how boundaryless society has become whenever the devil made me do it is used as a legitimate defense for a man who had committed murder. Thankfully, the jury saw through it and gave Guy Lynch 75 years. He's 51, I think, right now, so he won't have a chance for parole until he's 81, so he's got 30 years with no chance of parole. But the idea that the devil made me do it, or that evil spirits took over my girlfriend and I was afraid, so I just shot her point blank in the head and then dumped her body, it just is further proof of how crazy society is getting, in my view. So those are two things that have happened in the past couple of weeks that I thought you should be aware of. The Sun isn't a blood, flood, and fire kind of paper, so we don't go to too much extent to cover such things. But I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about it only as examples of things that typically we see happen elsewhere, but that are happening or have happened right here in Waxahachie. So the craziness, the crime, the ridiculous nature of how people justify the worst kind of behaviors is resonating in some cases, at least in two cases, right here in Waxahachie. A couple of other things I want to share with you. As you know by now, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, I think he's somewhere in the $280 billion range. I remember not all that long ago where Warren Buffett and Bill Gates were the world's richest men in the 70 and 80 billion range, and thought that was incomprehensible or not able to understand or fathom. I still believe that, but we're talking about a man now, Elon Musk, who is $280 billion and in a hurry has made an offer on Twitter, and Twitter played around with that, and then recently in the past few days has said, we will sell it to you. So now we have political parties in this country going crazy because they believe that a man buying Twitter, a company that has put its grips on free speech, shut it down to the extent that it will just ban people, suspend people from using Twitter, so on and so forth. Now we have people in the world today that are saying that a man who wants to restore free speech is actually the bad guy. again, it goes back to someone trying to do something right and good being seen as evil and bad, rather than those who do evil and bad being seen as evil and bad. So it's another example of the kind of upside down world in which we live. Frankly, from my point of view, America needs more of the Elon Musks in this world. Not just smart, risky, bold entrepreneurs, but somebody who believes in the Constitution, somebody who believes in free speech in this case, and somebody who's willing to put their money where their mouth is. I think the price that he's going to pay for Twitter is somewhere between 44 and 46 billion, and so it's no chump change. But I thought that you should be aware of that. So we'll see as the process has to take its course and go through all the government bureaucracy to make that deal happen. We'll see what goes on, and we'll see whether or not those who were banned from Twitter are able to get back on Twitter and carry on in the way that they were. Another I want to share with you is that the government, if you haven't heard, the government under President Biden is creating a group, and this is brought on by Musk and Twitter, called the Disinformation Governance Board. So I don't know how many people sit on that board. Some have termed it the Ministry of Truth. But what I find interesting, it doesn't matter to me who's in the office of president or what party is in charge. But what I find interesting is that the government, known since it was created for being the source of disinformation, is now creating a Disinformation Governance Board. It's almost laughable, but that's what's happening. So it's much like the fox guarding the hen house. The government is synonymous with disinformation. Just think of all the information that we've been given in your lifetime from the government, and as time has gone on and governments have become more creative and it's more vitriolic and hateful and divisive, the disinformation just seems to get more bold and crazy every day. So the government now has a board that's going to be in charge of making sure, I guess, that people are using their free speech the right way, which is a bit of an oxymoron. So just wanted you to be aware of that. Another thing I want you to be aware of is Apple. That's obviously a household name in our world today, and I'm an Apple products buyer and user and always have been since it came out with its iPhone and iPad and every other thing that starts with an I. I like to own and have those gadgets. But Apple now has on its App Store, an emoji of a pregnant man. And it's another example of what might shock the senses. It certainly shocks mine. Men can't get pregnant, yet Apple, for whatever reason, has decided to put available to the public an emoji of a pregnant man on its App Store. And I'm sure people will download it, use it. I don't know what setting or in what context it will be used, but it's just another example of how insane it's gotten out there. And we're not talking about insanity only in certain circles. We're talking about, in my view anyway, a level of insanity that's permeating big-time companies, companies that millions and millions and millions of people across the world rely on. Apple is an example of one that's just, I guess, woke is that term. So it is an example of the complete disorder in society that's happening now. We just saw the same thing kind of happen with Disney with its behaviors and actions on the law in Florida. Whether you agree with or disagree with the law in Florida, it's an example of a corporation taking a role, and now, given the actions of the governor in Florida, has a battle on its hand. So we don't want Waxahachie to be woke, nor do we want Waxahachie to become a place where the creativity of excuses for bad behaviors exist, and as a result, more bad behaviors continue to happen and grow. We don't want that. We want Waxahachie to be different, and that's why I just wanted to share these things with you. Waxahachie is extraordinary. Whether you've been here all your life or whether you've been here for a week, you're here, you stay here, you moved here because Waxahachie is an extraordinary place, and it is my hope that we can keep it that way. The only way we can keep it that way is to be aware of what's going on, to be in touch, to stand firm for that which is right and reject that which is wrong. So I wanted to share with those things with you today in hopes that maybe it would cause you to pause and think a little bit about them and see if there's something you can do to help. So it's with that I say thank you for listening and for your support. I'm Scott Brooks, and this has been Straight Up. Thank you.